Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to sew the muslin of your jacket. Alright, so the pieces you're going to need for this are your upper collar, your under collar, your back neckline facing. This is your jacket hem facing. You're going to need your lapel facing and the front of your jacket with the lapel. You will also need your jacket back. Okay, we've already gone through and marked all our waistlines and center fronts and roll lines on all our pieces and on both sides. Okay, next thing you need to make sure that is marked on here is where your lapel and collar separate. So on your collar, your upper and lower collar, or upper and under collar, on your lapel facing and on your jacket facing, you should all have something, call it point E. Alright? And that at that point is where your collar and your lapel separate, meaning you'll be stitching down your neckline, and when you get to that point you stop stitching. Alright? It's very important. So make sure you mark all those points on, again, your upper collar, your under collar, your jacket facing, and your front jacket. Okay, all you have to do, since it's just a muslin, is just put a pin through your point E, and then take a pencil and mark it on both sides. Okay, so you can see it. And you'll do that on all these pieces. All right, and you can probably see on the collar, I've already done it, that blue mark right there. I'm not sure if you can see it. Okay, that was the under collar. The upper collar, I have it right there. Facing, I have it. And then on the front of the jacket, it's marked right there. Okay. Alright, we are ready to start stitching this together. We're going to start by stay stitching. Okay, stay stitching is very important. So what we're going to stay stitch are our armholes. Okay, we're going to stay stitch our neckline, and we're going to stay stitch down the front of the jacket or the edge of the lapel. Okay, for the jacket front. On our lapel facing, we're going to do our neckline, and we're going to do down the lapel. On the back neck facing, we'll do our neckline, and we'll do this bottom edge of the lapel of the facing. And then on our upper collar, we'll open this up because this is all one piece. We're going to stay stitch around the whole collar, and same thing with our under collar. We'll stay stitch around the whole thing. Okay, so we're going to stay stitch, and then we're going to do, and then we'll stitch our darts. So there are my two jacket fronts, stay stitched. Okay, and you can see I stay stitched the armhole, necklines, and the front of the jacket on both of them. And I stitched my dart at the side seam. I didn't stitch the body dart, I didn't stitch the darts here in the body of the jacket, just for the sake of time in this demo. You should be definitely stitching those. So let's stay stitch our lapels, collars now. And okay, another pattern piece we also need to stay stitch is the back jacket pattern piece. On this we need to stay stitch our neckline and our armhole. Okay, I'll also be stitching the shoulder dart on this. Alright, now we've stay stitched everything. So we stay stitched our upper collar, our under collar, our back neckline facing. This is our lapel facing we've stay stitched. The front of the jacket we've stay stitched. And we've stitched the dart at side seam. You should have also stitched any darts you have in the body of the jacket. And the back jacket, we've also stitched at neckline and armhole. And you should have stitched your dart at your shoulder and the darts in the body of your jacket as well. Okay, so now we're going to start putting our jacket together so that we can attach our collars and lapel facing. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is take our front and back jacket patterns. I'll lay these aside. So here's my front, here's my back. We're going to sew the center back of our jacket together first, put right sides together and stitch this together. And then, once we have that stitched, so we'll put right sides together, stitch that at a 1/2 inch, and then once that's stitched together, I'll take my fronts and I'm going to stitch my side seams together, and I'm going to stitch my shoulder seam together. Okay, just like that on both sides. Alright, so let's go to the machine and do that. Alright, here we are at the sewing machine. I'm going to stitch my center back together. I have 1/2 inch seam allowance there. And make sure you back tack at the beginning and end because this is a permanent seam. Now my center back has been stitched. I'm going to go ahead and press that, and I also need to press all my darts first too. And let's press our darts as well. Remember that your dart presses towards the center. So in this case, it's my center back. I like to put the tip of the dart right at the edge of the sleeve board. It gives it a nice good press. Don't want to end up with any puckers or dimples at the end of your dart. You want it to go right. You want it to slide nice and easy right back into the fullness that it's creating. Okay. And while we're here, we'll press the darts on the side seam. Okay. Remember, this is a horizontal dart, so it's going to press down towards the hem. And all the darts, the vertical darts in the body of your jacket, the close-ended darts, those again will press towards center. So if they're in the front, they'll press towards center front. And if they're in the back, they'll press towards center back. Here's the back. I've stitched my side seam, I've stitched my shoulder darts, I've pressed my center back side seam open, and I've pressed my center darts, or my shoulder darts towards the center. I'm going to turn it. So here's the right side of my back. Now I'm going to stitch my side seams. Okay, so this is the right side of my back, this is the right side of my front. I'm going to put right sides together, lining up my side seams. And I'm going to stitch the side seam at a 1/2 inch, and then I'm also going to stitch my shoulder dart as well, and I'm going to stitch that at 1/2 inch. Okay, and I'll do that on both sides. So side seam and shoulder dart. Okay, I like to always just put a pin right in my waist. just to make sure. End up with it there. I don't want my feed dogs easing my fabric too much and not have my balance lines lined up correctly. Alright. There's one side seam. Let's do the other one. The other side seam stitched. Now let's do our shoulder. Okay, and we'll do the other side as well. Alright, and there is the other shoulder stitched. So now we can go to the iron and press these seams open. Alright, so now we can press our seams open. Let's go ahead, press our shoulder seams and side seams open. There we go. Alright, so the body of the jacket has now been sewn together. Okay, we stitched our center back, our shoulder seam, and our side seams. Okay. Notice that our balance lines are matching up at our side seam. Okay. And then when we have to try this on somebody or fit it to somebody, we'll be matching up when we close this, our center front, which is this seam, our line right here, and our waistline, they'll be overlapping with the other sides, center front and waistline. Okay. And then the lapel will go on the roll line, like that. Alright, so now we're ready to attach our under collar. So we need a little more prep for that. Let's grab the under collar. The under collar, remember, is the collar that you cut on bias. And there's two pieces to it. So the first thing we need to do with the under collar is we need to stitch, we need to take our under collar and we need to put right sides together and stitch it together at center back at a 1/2 inch. So let's go do that. So here we are. We're going to put right sides together and stitch at a 1/2 inch. Let's press that seam open. There we go. Okay, so now comes where we stitch the under collar onto the body of the jacket. Okay, we're going to start. Let's open up our jacket. Here's the center back right here. Shoulder seam, okay, and point E. Here's our under collar, here's our center back, this is our neckline right here, okay. You can see we have two notches, one right here and one right here. Those line up with the shoulder seam. And then we have our point E, which is this intersection here and this intersection here. Okay? Okay, so let's put this together. Here's the center back of my jacket. Here's the center back of my undercollar. Okay, also notice this is the right side of my jacket, right side of undercollar. Okay, here is my shoulder seams of my jacket, the shoulder notches of the undercollar. Here is the point E where my collar and lapel separate. Here is my point E where my collar and lapel separate. So let's go ahead and flip this right sides together. And we're going to start by lining up our center backs and pinning that together. So line up center back to center back and pin it. And then come out and you want to line up your notch, your shoulder notch of your collar to the shoulder seam of your jacket. Now there should be a little bit of ease in the collar. Okay, the collar should be a little bigger than the jacket because we added that in when we drafted it. And we're coming around now. We want to come around, so we're going to go right to our point E and we're going to match up. And basically it's where your two stay stitchings intersect, probably on yours, but you have it marked as well. We're going to match up our point E's together right on that stay stitching line. So, okay. These, again, we're stitching two very opposite seams together, so we're going to have to just go slowly and ease that. Okay, our collar will go against the feed dogs of the machine as we stitch. So I'm going to come out this way and do the same thing. Match my shoulder notch of my collar to the neckline and shoulder seam of my jacket. And come out and match up our point E's. Now very important is point E. Alright, so there we are. We have it pinned together. So now we're going to go stitch this at the machine. Alright, again, I'm putting the collar side against my feed dogs. Here's my feed dogs. That's what pulls the fabric through the machine so that it will ease it right through. So I'm going to start right at point E. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my needle down right through point E. I can see it through. See that little blue right there? It's going to go right down through point E. And when I back tack, I'm going to make sure I do not back tack into the lapel past my point E. I'm just going to start right there. Okay. So let's go ahead and stitch this. Again, you'll have to do a little easing. Go slow. You're just going to go, a few stitches at a time, and then you'll manipulate your fabric and make sure everything's lined up. And then a few more stitches. Make sure that this shoulder seam doesn't get folded over as you stitch over it. You want it to stay open. You can ruin how your jacket and collar lay together. Okay. And now I'm coming towards the back. Again, make sure that these seams stay open. Notice I pinned them both open because I don't want it to fold over on itself. And that should ease right in, no problem. It's only 1/8 of an inch extra we added on to the pattern of the collar. So, especially if you're just stitching 2 layers of muslin together, those feed dogs, especially if you're on an industrial machine, will ease together very easily. It's after the shoulder seam is where it really gets tricky because you have 2 seams that are going in opposite directions you're trying to stitch together. And that's where you have to really slow down and just take it a few stitches at a time. And just keep manipulating your fabric together. Smoothing it out as you go. It does seem doesn't seem natural necessarily when it wants to go together, but we've drafted it so that it will. See right now, my 2 seams do not want to line up here. There we go. Make sure you don't end up with any puckers in there whatsoever. And you want to stop right at 1. There we go. Alright, so here we go. We've stitched it together. Make sure we put right sides together when we did it. Flip it around. Let's make sure there's no puckers in the jacket or the collar. And it looks like you got a clean stitch, clean seam there. So that's good. Alright, so now what we can do is because these 2 seams are kind of pulling in opposite directions and we stay stitch everything, we're going to gently clip just to our stitching line. Alright, do not cut through it around these curves. Okay, here's my point E. I'm not going to clip right there. I'm going to come back a little bit, about 1 inch or so away, and just clip about every inch, maybe 3/4, and then this will lay much nicer. Good. We can just give a couple clips inside here around the curve. Okay, you don't want to over clip. Yep. Over clipping weakens the seam. Okay, you only want to clip as much as you need to, and that's it. Alright, so now let's press this seam open. I'm doing it over a ham because I have a curved seam. Clip right here. Okay, if you see the seam is really pulling, kind of not laying quite nice, you need to add another clip like I just did. Make sure your fabric isn't puckering underneath. Here. One more clip. And now I can go ahead and open those up as you press. So you can see now how this looks. I'll flip it around. There, I've stitched my under collar to the body of my jacket. It's the inside. Here's the outside. Notice now, here's my roll line. See how it matches up? The roll line matches right up with the roll line on my jacket. Same thing here. Okay? And that's what we want. And we'll put this on a form. So here is the jacket with the collar sewn on. You can see that, I don't know if you can see through the muslin, but you can see that the center fronts are lined up and the waistlines are lined up. It's not pinned. Also remember that I did not sew the darts on the front or the back of this jacket. I'm just doing this video really to show you how to attach the collars. So remember when you're doing yours that you need to sew those darts. So this jacket is boxier than it typically would be. So if we go closer, we can see the lapel here in this collar where it comes together. All right, and here, that is point E, where I stop stitching, they separate. Okay, and if I turn this around now a little bit. Okay, just the collar, the back. And continue turning it. And we're back. Okay. Now it may be difficult to see here, but here's the roll line of the lapel, okay? And it goes right up into the collar's roll line. So that's what it looks like before we attach the facing of the lapel and the upper collar, which we'll do now.